This is Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Kerry-Ann Williams. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Massachusetts, and this is a podcast that's about everything related to mental wellness in the Black community and beyond. Joining me for today's show is James Nicholas Kinney. I'm going to add him to the podcast now. So James Nicholas Kinney is a global executive, a certified yoga and meditation teacher, a diversity, equity, and inclusion innovator, author, musician, and motivational speaker. He's also a survivor, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that with him today. He's been featured on CNBC, CNN, and he does groundbreaking work in the areas of psychological safety, meditation, mindfulness, and inclusion to cultivate courage and growth in people and organizations. So welcome to the podcast, James.
Dr. Williams, I really appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I'll tell you, as a psychiatrist, it's very infrequent that I hear any man talk about the importance of mental health.
Right.
Unless they themselves are a licensed mental health practitioner. So I'm curious to know more about you and how it came to be that mental health became something that you value. Tell us your story.
Well, I love that you said that. You're right, because when I look at all of these public figures that we look up to, like I'm a big Steve Harvey fan. He drops a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge. Will Smith, despite of a few things in the last 12 to 18 months, I've always looked up to Will Smith as a mentor of Barack Obama. So sometimes when I do those vision exercises, I see myself with Will and Barack in Martha's Vineyard, having that conversation. Like, guys, I dreamed I'd be here with you one day. We don't have a lot of male and Black male figures that are leading and driving and having these conversations. That is accurate. For me, it wasn't really an option. I was 30. I was working on Wall Street doing advertising sales. I'm still in advertising now. And I had a crash and burn. Dr. Williams, you know what that is, but layman's terms, crash and burn, medical terms, I developed anxiety and depression. The anxiety went into agoraphobia. The agoraphobia lasted for so long that I became depressed, right? Mm-hmm. So I had that based off of a number of factors, and so cool that I can talk to you because you know everything. Usually I'm not using science terms, even though I've educated myself so well throughout the years, but there were genetic factors about me that led to my anxiety and depression. And then I had a trauma event. And then there's a life circumstance. So I think what a lot of people don't realize is that when you have this mixture of either cross-generational or transgenerational genetic factors, which a lot of us have, then you have a trauma event or a life event, then your physical environment is also not in a place that you can respond appropriately to what a mental health crisis could be. You get into the situation I was in. So I personally was on a 3-year healing journey, which medication was very difficult for me and it really didn't work very well. Lexapro to be specific, and we can talk about why and what. But I read 50 books. I ran 50 miles. I learned how to meditate. I became a yoga teacher. I mean, I treated it like cancer. I was like, I'm going to beat this. Mm-hmm. So I educated myself deeply from neuroscience to psychology because I knew that I was a shell of myself. And I was actually intrigued. How did I go from this thriving person to someone who's trapped in my apartment? I mean, I was miserable. I did a speech lately, and I know we're going to talk about this. I literally saw myself in the white room, the padded white room. Mm-hmm. And it was scary. And, and as a, youngest child of my mother, and to be a Black person who's reached the C-suite in the business world, serving billion-dollar companies, worst thing you want to do is move back home with mama. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a step back. There's a giant step backwards.
You're the one who made it. You don't want to go back and live with mama in the living room. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think about, that journey that you went through and what it must have been like for you to come to terms with the fact that now you do need help of some kind. Because one of the, I talk a lot on the podcast about, what the Black community needs.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things is that making that decision to actually see somebody or to go get help.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned it was kind of just not an option for you because like it was just things were at that level. What was it like for you when you had to kind of go see that person for the first time?
Well, the way that I would approach this is that, Dr. Williams, as you likely know, we don't even have the language to articulate what's happening to us and what we're going through.
Mhm.
So if you don't have the language, it's really tough. It's like someone who makes $20 an hour, which there's nothing wrong with that,
Mhm.
going to a billionaire and trying to have lunch and talking about like their portfolio. There's just a language that's completely different. So in America in general and in the world, because I do travel globally, I'm sure you'll agree, we don't even have the language to understand what's going on with us. So I had no idea. I suffered in silence for a full year. I didn't even know how to finally make that call to my mom and my mentor. Eventually, what came out of my mouth was, I don't feel right.
Yeah.
And I'm having trouble. I'm having challenges. But there was no language. So then my 3-year journey was about education and practice.
Mhm.
So that moment when I finally saw Dr. Darapak, who is the first psychologist that I went to, she was awesome because she gave me Eastern and Western, right? And she did a good job of educating me. I mean, I did exposure therapy. I did all the things that you would know about.
Mhm.
But and I still use my tools and work on my anxiety today. I don't do these podcasts or speeches that I do now as a completely, I was broke and now I own 17 houses. Like there's no infomercial here. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm still using my tools. It is the way that I say it. But yeah, Dr. Patricia Darapak, you will always remember that first groundbreaking therapist and or doctor that helps you get through. And to this day, I know her. I'm thankful for her.
No, I'm glad that you mentioned that, and I'm glad also that you spoke a little bit about educating yourself.
Yeah.
That the psychologist provided education, but that you also educated yourself too, because I think that's one of the other kind of important touch points for the Black community as well is that you mentioned the language, finding language to describe what's going on, but also the education about just knowing what's going on with yourself, with your body, with your mind, understanding something about neuroscience, understanding something about psychology. And I feel like part of the reason that I have this podcast and part of the reason that I think part of what I want to convey to the Black community is that education, that language that people can use to say, you know what, I listened to this podcast and I learned that maybe what I'm going through might be called dot, dot, dot.
Mm-hmm.
It may be depression if I'm experiencing that. It's not just sadness. It may be anxiety. Anxiety can look this way. And so I feel like that's such a important point that you made, that you really educated yourself on how the body works to lead you to realize what you needed for yourself, because it's different for each person. It's slightly different for each person. You mentioned you tried medications, for example, and for some people that's life-changing, and for other people it doesn't work very well.
Correct. And as you know, in the Black community, we're not a monolith. So everyone's going to have a different experience. It's universal science. However, Black people in particular, Black Americans in particular, we often are living with complex traumas.
Mhm.
So the complex trauma conversation, helping people understand that typically it compounds the impact of GAD, general anxiety disorder, right? Someone gets murdered for driving, and then it's like Monday back at work, right? Or the regular things that happen. Like I remember one of the most recent murders committed by Black police officers in Memphis. I remember driving, and I remember one of the biggest posts I ever put on LinkedIn that was an accident. I think I was the vice president at the time, and I said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm a vice president and I don't feel safe driving." And it got like 200,000 different likes and different things. But anyway, the reason why I bring up murder by police officers is that that is a really unique amygdala trigger, to put it in
Mhm.
science terms that you would
Mhm.
know and I would know.
Mhm.
That really few people understand in America
Mhm.
what it's like to be a Black male driving. I remember Lakewood, Ohio, and this kind of just brings it back. I remember my brother had a Buick Regal, and my brother's 6 years older than me, so he was driving. We lived in an all homogenous, as a DEI officer, I like to use proper terms, an all homogenous community. And I'm his little brother. We're driving in the Buick. And I still remember getting pulled over with the super bright lights and what that feeling was like getting pulled over. Now, anyone, when they get pulled over, their heart's going to race. They're going to sweat, oh, I'm getting a ticket. But the Black male uniquely has a thought when you get pulled over, how's this going to go? So if you bring that back to mental health and talk about the fear center of the brain, which is the amygdala, amongst other parts of how the brain and the personality work, that is a unique Black experience. And I try to tell people all the time, DEI is not the Black experience. Black experience is not DEI. These are two different conversations. And unfortunately, we bucketed them all into one thing. But the Black experience, when you're driving, it's tough for someone to debate me on that not being a real terror and or complex trauma matter, specifically pertaining to the mental health conversation.
Yeah, and I think people sometimes don't recognize trauma reactions.
Yeah,
and they see it as threatening or that sort of thing, and it's something that I think we need to keep talking about. We need to keep putting out there that education about the triggers and the trauma reactions, and like this is what it looks like when somebody faces those bright lights, when somebody is fearful that is your life going to be in jeopardy, they may respond a certain way.
Yeah, I'm running from the police because I fear that I might get shot. I'm not evading arrest. If I'm evading arrest, the officer is then able to shoot, tase, or to chase. But to your point, Dr. Williams, this is a fear response.
Yeah.
So if we train more police officers, and I have some very, I think, controversial thoughts on how to revamp police departments across the country. But this is one very there's a lot of acuity to this conversation as to how it may be very different, right? Another thing, if I may, when I look at hip hop and where we are, I think I've been so excited with J. Cole and Kendrick and a dude named Saba out of Chicago that they've been doing with music, and I say Chance, the rapper too, in terms of bringing up things about mental health. I mean, J. Cole in particular is like incredible in his ability to talk about mental health. But the reason why I bring up hip hop is that, as you would know, Dr. Williams, and I'm going to state this with a question: how does depression show up in Black men? Right. So this is a whole podcast, right? And then you go, oh, hip hop says it's the syrup, the lean, the pills, the weed, the alcohol, and the this and the this. But you and I, being so fortunate and privileged now to be, you're a doctor, I'm a global chief executive, we now have the hindsight to go, oh man, I love my brothers so much, but we're hiding a lot of pain and trauma. And for some, I can't say a whole population is, in drug abuse for whatever reasons. But if you trace it back to any demographic, Asian male, South Asian male, East Asian male, Caucasian male, Black male, etc., it's super interesting to say, well, why is there this prolific usage, right, of coping mechanisms? And that's the term that you and I would use in mental health, right? So it's like, what's the root cause of depression? Because we've created a whole market and a whole world that we're solving for symptoms after the fact, but we're typically not looking at root causes.
No, and that's exactly right. I think, I feel like, Black men have historically been expected to just take care of themselves, from way back in history. Just take care of yourself. Just push through, quote unquote, man up. with manliness being defined as not needing therapy, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
You know, I wanted to ask about any barriers that you faced when you were on your journey, your mental health journey. You know, what was hard for you?
Therapy is not cheap. Finding the right therapist is not easy.
Mhm.
Having a therapist for a sustainable amount of time when you're broke, which I
Mhm.
was,
Mhm.
is also tough.
Mhm.
For me, I didn't need necessarily a female, male, or black therapist. I just needed a therapist.
Mhm.
But those are the initial barriers, I would say. And then in addition to that, no offense to the medical community, but I think if you're a young black man, how I was 15 years ago, I just needed in plain English. Because if you Google it, you get overwhelmed. It's like Mayo Clinic and it's like WebMD, and you get really overwhelmed.
Mhm.
So sometimes you're getting like the super Eastern esoteric, like, I think therefore I am, and you're like, damn, that's prolific. But like, what does this have to do with me having a panic attack, right? Then you go Western world, and it's like, oh, we got excuse me, we got a pill for you to take, or and as you know, most internal medicine doctors, when you go to them with a mental health issue, it really should be a referral to someone else. Because I've met some internal medicine doctors, and like my homeboy works at the National Institute of Health, and my cousin is a orthopedic surgeon. Like, I have black doctors in the family. But when you're in that type of trauma situation, everything is urgent in your mind. Like, you don't really have the like 4 weeks to wait, 6 weeks to wait for an appointment to then go to the internal medicine doctor or family medicine doctor. And then they go, well, you can get some Zoloft, or you can get, you got to get the referral over here. So when I think about the system, there are certainly barriers there. So if you think about the timetable that it took me a year just to say something, right? So then it took me a good 6 months to be like, oh, I found a doctor.
Mhm.
Lexapro has me having dreams of demons and goblins, and my mouth is dry and my palms are sweaty. So this is not working. Then I get off the Lexapro and I'm scared to get off it because you're told that you'll go even more bananas if you get off the Lexapro. Then I'm just out here like waiting tables, like reading books. You know what I mean? I'm on my own at that point because I can't afford a therapy anymore because I don't have a job.
Yeah.
So those were barriers. And I consider myself to be, even though I was broke, I'm still privileged.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm talking about like someone like really, really broke, like in the hood. That would have been a completely different experience. I was a college educated person that had a non-exempt employee job, and I
Mhm.
chose to leave corporate to heal. I can't imagine if I was someone in the middle of Baltimore.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's interesting because as I was kind of like jotting down notes of what common barriers are, you hit on them. It's very frequently it comes across my email. People are looking for referrals. People are looking for a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and it's so how are you going to pay? Is it going to be private pay? Is it going to be insurance? Because that will affect who you can see. Either way, there's a wait list, but with private pay, there are some more options. You
Mhm.
sometimes see different kinds of people versus if you're using insurance, you may have more limited options. And so it's definitely one of the things that can cause some discrepancies,
Mhm.
in terms of the mental health access. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes an interesting case. So I'm on the board of a mental health nonprofit called The Big Silence, and the money raised, it's an official 501c3, and the money raised there is to support like crisis text line, grants for therapy, and that's huge
mhm,
because it gives people that sponsorship to have access. And then what I've done with the Advertising Alliance for Mental Health is literally just it's on demand free courses and then group coaching,
oh,
um, weekly breathing meditations. It's more of like proactive mental health is what I do. And I let people know that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, but I'm an advocate and a motivator of mental health movement. So my movement at Advertising Alliance for Mental Health is all about proactivity and giving people that education piece and that tool piece, but it's free and it's completely open to anyone. So almost like if we were fighting a revolution, right? Or the civil rights, which we're still in, you need everybody, right? Like you need people like me that are just spreading the news and the information that's factual and truth. We need actual doctors like you that are on the front line. So thank you. We need insurance people trying to do some different things to remove barriers. We need government funding. We need it in schools. We need it in churches. I mean, you need it everywhere. Yeah. So it's not just one person or one part or one type of person that's going to help this movement.
I'm so glad to hear that, because it's something that crosses my mind all the time are there ways to help fund people to get, because, the insurance what the insurance will give you is what I would call basic treatment. Mm-hmm. And it's very much geared towards a certain model, the physician, the medication model, the therapy, kind of talk therapy in an office model. But if you need to veer any different direction, maybe doing music therapy, art therapy, mindfulness, meditation, like if your therapist doesn't provide that and you need to get it somewhere else, and now you're veering a little bit away from insurance and you may need help with that. And those are the things that helps the body heal from trauma.
Yeah, I'm so happy you said that too, because just yesterday when I was doing my meditation workshop, I gave people 4 different types of meditation. And I think most people were like, oh, I didn't even know there was 4 types. But there's an unlimited types, right? Like I haven't even explored all the types of meditation. And then mindfulness is a conversation in itself in terms of a mindfulness practice, a meditation practice, yoga as a practice, running meditation. I mean, we can go on and on and on. So I love what you said, because what worked for me won't necessarily work for you or for the next person. And I needed to mix it all together. I mean, I had a woman that I met, incredible person in LA, and she was married to a native chief, and she had a lot of the customs. She was Hispanic, but she was married to a native chief, and she had so much knowledge. And she talked about how in native culture, meaning Native American, who for those who aren't familiar with that term, that in native culture, walking is how you processed things. Walking is how you solve problems in the community and in the village. And she would just talk about how, walking is therapy. And I remember when I was just going through it, I would walk every day. And it was one of the things that made me feel so much better in my body and in my mind, outside of working out, but literally just walking and nature. I mean, I've been so impressed the last couple of years to see everything from hiking clubs to nature clubs to, bird watching, which that's a famous case now. But you know what I mean? But it's been so cool that, we can tap into all this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that, again, education about how accessible things are. And for people to go with what's possible where they live and that sort of thing, but knowing that it doesn't, people don't have to stick to, whatever kind of clinical model, or these things can be add-ons, that you can mix and match.
That's exactly what I would say. I'm a big fan and a proponent of Western medicine. Absolutely. I'm not anti-Western or Eastern. Again, Dr. Derapat gave me the mixture of both. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what really did it for me. Like there was actual science-based things where this was like, okay, this is Western and it makes sense. And I'm being educated, I'm learning. And then there was things that were Eastern, and the combination of both was so important for me.
Now, I want to know a little bit about the role of arts and music, because you're a musician, and I'm very excited about that. I think I kind of live vicariously through musicians, because I would love to be able to produce music of some kind, and I'm just not really able to. But how do you use arts to promote your own wellness?
Yeah, well, Music has always been very special to me. I was just born with, listening to it and feeling it and embodying it. My dad, huge music fan. So I'm assuming from a DNA perspective, it came from him. I know my grandfather was also really massive on music on my dad's side. So I'm sure that's where it happened in the F1, F2 generation, or I forgot how all that works. But I started rapping at like, I don't know, 12, 10, 11, and I could just rap. And then when I got 16, I got like really good at rapping where like I would win all the freestyle circles and like all of the ciphers. So I became known as like a really good freestyle rapper. And then I was also a singer when I was a kid. So classically trained singer. And then in college, I started a college band, and I was really fortunate for that band to take off. I was touring in 5 different states by the time I graduated college. So music has never gone out of my life. So I've been really fortunate to create a pretty prolific corporate career. But about 18 months ago, I was like, man, I got to do something creative that really fuels my spiritual fire, right? So oftentimes when I'm talking about like what is mental health, proactive mental health, that mind body soul connection is something that I think anyone can recognize, right? And when you talk about that soul connection, you have to do something, or you should, I would advise for people, do something that really connects to their soul, something that is timeless, meaning that when you're doing it, you have no sense of time, something that you would do for free, something that you would do for someone you love. I mean, the definitions of living your purpose and or soul connection aren't that complicated, right? Because it's that thing you did. Like it was like when it was before Biggie was Biggie, he loved writing rhymes. You hear Jay-Z's story at a very young age. He enjoyed that process of writing rhymes and writing lyrics and making music. So going back to me not being Biggie and not being Jay-Z, or always be a different podcast. I created a one-man show, and I didn't even know what a one-man show was, but I had a vision of myself on stage with thousands of people, and I would be kind of doing like a TED talk, and then I would do acting, and then I would do music, and it was just this like not a traditional one-man show, but this combination of bringing my full self to the table. But here's the kicker: around the mental health conversation. And I was like, oh, that's dope. Yeah. If I can edutain people about mental health, how cool is that? So I get to bring a piece of me, music, to the table that I haven't been able to do because I've been, corporate and professional. And now I have a new challenge, which is being an actor. And that was scary. But again, when I teach people about mental health, I say, healthy growth and challenges, part of building resilience, part of neurogenesis, part of all the things, right? Yeah. So I wrote my first story about resilience. And I was like, this is so cool that I wrote a fictional story. And then I read it like 42 times. I rehearsed it in the mirror. I'm nervous. I'm 45 years old and I'm trying to like become an actor at 45. And I'm like, I'm all in. So I did my first show and man, people loved it. And I was like, yeah. It was a story on resilience. And then like I had music playing and I had, and I was like, damn, this is it. So I did 2 shows last year. I just did a show last week, and it was literally, I'm not just saying this because I'm on your podcast. The show last week was literally the best one yet. I mean, wow. I opened with like the TED Talk thing, and I told my story. Then I had a Black male yoga teacher named Carlton Frazier do the opening meditation. Mm-hmm. Then I had a good friend of mine named Lauren Donahue do like a TED Talk on the power of healing. And then I did a 3-skit segment about mental health. So the one-man show is a vehicle within the movement that I'm building as a way to have a creative conversation about mental health. And honestly, going back to hip hop and music and the arts that you're talking about, I'm not, J. Cole to me is arguably like top 3, in terms of like current artist in the world. And in hip hop terms, he's definitely in my top 5 of all time.
Mhm.
So J. Cole, being as amazing as he is, he's able to have a conversation with people about mental health because it's in the form of hip hop. So I'm not doing anything different in that I'm using acting as a way to expose people to mental health in a way that, to your point, is not clinical. And
Yeah.
then it allows people to listen and say, oh, he put it in the spoken word with piano behind it. Oh, he was talking about it like this. He was talking about it like that. I can relate to that. Okay, maybe I'm going to speak up. Maybe I'm going to go see a therapist because now I know there's no stigma behind it.
Yeah. And I think that's so important because I remember you mentioned that when you first started to try to educate yourself, that there was all this very kind of like complex clinical terms that were just not that clear. Yeah, it was overwhelming, you know. And I think this format, it gets people to get the information in a way that's entertaining and educational. And I think people really appreciate that they enjoyed something but also learned something. Do you
Yeah,
find that when you kind of do this presentation, is it in any way kind of, I don't want to say cathartic, but does it help you to process your own experiences in some way too?
100%. Every time I do it, I'm just like, thank you, God, for the opportunity and the ability. I feel alive. It recaps my journey and it recaps my experience. And I feel so fortunate, if I'm going back to my why and my purpose, that I'm able to get this news and information out to people in a way that transforms them. But of course, the teacher always needs the lesson the most.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it really reinforces, like just yesterday when I taught the meditation workshop, I did it for my company and I was like, man, I needed that hour to meditate when I was teaching.
Yeah. So where can people find out about your one-man show?
Yeah, so I'm on TikTok and Instagram, of course, at James Nicholas Kinney, LinkedIn, James Nicholas Kinney. So I'm pretty easy to find on Google and all channels. James and then Nicholas is spelled Nicholas. So I'm easy to find, James Nicholas Kinney. My platform is advertisingmentalhealth.com. So that's also very easy to remember. And anyone can get free weekly affirmations delivered to their inbox. So as soon as you sign up every week, I send out a meditation, a breathing exercise, and a positive message with music, of course. Super, super simple. And then there's free courses on my platform, advertisingmentalhealth.com. And then me personally, which I'm running all the things. My Instagram is filled with nothing but positive messages, breathing exercises, stories. And you know what? Consistency is hard in this day and age because there's so much noise out there. But I'm really proud of the consistency that my team and I are putting out there, and people are really starting to notice. And I thank you, Dr. Williams, for giving me the opportunity because people are starting to notice. I mean, my plan is to be the Steve Harvey of mental health. Like I have a specific plan and a specific dream, and I know how Steve Harvey or Kevin Hart, I already know who I'm gonna meet. Like Kevin Hart will welcome me in and be like, yo, this brother right here, we need to put him on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like as soon as they learn about me, Kevin Hart and Steve Harvey are gonna be like, yo, we gonna put him on because he's checking for us. And we need his voice. And so that's really what I'm working on in building. And then, the tide rising all ships, I get to come up with people like you because there's not a big group of us. And this is how we do it.
Awesome. I mean, I guess I just wanted to add, as you've been talking about like that vision, and I am such a big fan of kind of holding that vision in your mind and visualizing like what you want for your future. I feel like it's a powerful, powerful thing. And so I just wanted to kind of lift that up a little bit.
Thank you. I thank you for seeing me, and I see you too. I'm gonna say this. When I was at my worst, stranded and stuck in my own mind, paralyzed in my body with fear and anxiety, I had a vision of myself as healthy and whole. I had a vision of myself going to birthday parties again. I had a vision of myself riding on planes again. I had a vision of myself doing all the things that I used to do. And to your point, Dr. Williams, without that vision and declaration over my state of being, and I'm talking about these are Jedi mind tricks. It's not it's not religion, even though I do believe in God 100%. This is the full secret sauce, that thoughts become things. So I had to see myself as healthy and whole in order to become healthy and whole.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wow. So thank you for coming on the show today. Any last words or so I've been to your Instagram page. You're right. It's filled with a lot of just cool stuff. So I would encourage our listeners to check out Instagram, LinkedIn, and you said TikTok, James Nicholas Kinney.
Yeah. My only other last words is I want to invite you to come speak at Advertising Alliance for Mental Health.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, just give me more information, and I'll be happy to speak. I've been doing this for a long time, and I feel like I have all this knowledge in my head that I love teaching. So,
super excited to have you. Appreciate the opportunity.
So thank you for joining me today, and thanks to our listeners today for joining us. You can connect with James on LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok. James Nicholas Kinney. You've been listening to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Kerry-Ann Williams. Take care and have a great week.